Okay, welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast. I'm John. I'm joined once again by my good friend Eddie.
Howdy, John.
How are things?
Going great.
Going great.
Coming up on the holidays quicker than I would like, but here we are.
That is true, but the weather is fantastic
Almost
this
60
week.
degrees today.
Yeah. I mean, we were playing pickleball right before we came
In
into-
shorts and T-shirts.
Yeah. I was hot. I forgot my lightweight hoodie, so I had my regular warm hoodie, and I was just sweating, but I didn't want to take it off because I am prone to not doing well with my skin in the sun.
My son's at Penn State, and I don't think you normally think of Pennsylvania as necessarily like a winter kind of state, but they're going to have some snow this week. I think highs are in the 30s there, and here we are in the 60s.
People think Colorado is cold, and it's cold up in the mountains. It gets cold here too, but in the Front Range, so Boulder, Denver area,
Yeah.
It'll get frigid and it'll snow a couple of feet, and then the next day it'll be
So
60
sunny,
degrees.
Yeah. The sun is just baking you.
Yeah. Even when it's 30 and sunny, it feels warm here.
We love Colorado.
We do. Well, we've got a fun show today,
Yeah.
Eddie. So our main segment today is a giveaway. So 12 days of Christmas. That was my original concept for this, was to give away 12 paddles. So 4 paddles each episode for 3 episodes leading up to Christmas for the 3 weeks up to Christmas. And as soon as I started sending out emails to paddle companies, they started replying. This is on a Sunday too. I got most things lined up on Sunday, and
That's
we
awesome.
now have over 20 paddles. I was going to make it a surprise for the last day, but we've got over 20 paddles and other accessories also. So we will leave some things for a surprise. But we're going to give away 4 paddles today, and tune in next week. We'll give away another 4 paddles. And
So how do we get to 20?
the last week we're going to give away
We just got to go
a whole
crazy.
boatload.
I love it.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yep.
Once again, you've exceeded expectations, John.
Well, I'm glad I
Which are
rise up to your
very low.
expectations. But we've also got some latest news, gear gossip. The Connor Pardoe interview will air on this week's podcast. I'll do kind of some highlights of it because we talked for a good hour, I feel like. Some of it was just off the cuff, getting started stuff, but I'll condense that into, 15 minutes maybe. And we talked about some upcoming news for the UPAA and the PPA. So tune into that. Interesting stuff. Fun to talk to him. What else? We got some paddles of the week and our gear deep dive and Q&A as always.
Fun episode.
Yes, indeed.
John, do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
I do. I mean, A Christmas Story was, what I grew up watching.
Right.
And it still gives me those.
I never saw that until I was like 20 years old.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So it must have looked horribly outdated by the time you watched it. But yeah, when I was a kid, I watched that, and it's still fun to watch. I showed my kids that.
Okay.
So that's one of them. How about you?
Do you count things like Die Hard and Harry Potter since they kind of happened during the winter?
Die Hard is
Does
a
that count as a
perennial Christmas
Okay.
movie. Yeah, it's not so much in our household, but I know a lot of people that watch that.
Still a classic.
That's a very classic, yeah. What's your classic, Christmas movie?
Oh, It's a Wonderful Life is up there, of course. Miracle on 34th Street. I mean, these go way back to black and white days, right?
Yeah, good
But
stuff.
Those are great.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of sponsors for this week's show. So first, let's talk about Centerline.
I noticed you're wearing a new hoodie.
Centerline Athletics. They have a couple of new additions
like
to
that.
their clothing line. So their Airlight tee that both of you and I have been wearing, which is fantastic. Warm weather, cools you off, wicking. They now have a black and a white option. That was their most requested colors, and they didn't have those before. It was like this color
And the
and they had
bluish.
yeah. What else did they have?
Like a light blue.
Okay. Was that the only one? They had a couple of colors.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had now black and white, and I got the black one. It's pretty sharp.
All right.
And yeah, they. I don't know if they listened to us. This is not exactly what we were recommending that they have. This is it is a lightweight hoodie, but it's not like a summer hoodie. It's some kind of high tech fabric that stabilizes your body temperature, but I do feel that it's not always warm, it's not always cool, but it's kind of somewhere in between. Clearly, you wouldn't be able to step out in 0-degree weather in this, nor would you want something that you're playing pickleball in that's super, super warm.
It's spring and fall.
Spring and fall,
I like
yeah.
it.
For summer, I think something lighter weight, but it keeps me warm in the house when I'm typing on my computer, and it serves well outside.
That's very cool.
Pickleball weather.
To get my hands on one of those.
Yes, indeed. Another ad we have today, another sponsor. Pickleball Blue Buck is a place you can go and get your paddle evaluated. And you enter your paddle model, brand, and its condition, and then it'll give you an evaluation, how much it would cost to sell person to person. So, nice little service to have, powered by get211.com. And yeah, you all know the story on it.
John, I want you to put in every single paddle that you have into that database and just
Give me
see
3
what kind of
weeks,
numbers. See what kind of numbers you come up with. 3 weeks. Sounds about right.
Good God. All right, well let's jump into our latest news. Nothing big has happened this week. If it has, then I've missed it. I don't think anything gigantic has happened in the pickleball space, but I do have some news about our podcast. So a lot of people have been asking, when is the next Melon code? Melon Hats have been doing with our podcast and Pickleball Studio a 24-hour code. Now give the code for 24 hours and you can use that to get a percentage off. Ours will be next week for next week's podcast. Activation window will go live at 9 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, December 11th, and go 24 hours into Thursday, December 12th. That will be a 25% discount on melon caps, and the code is JK25. I'll announce that again on next week's podcast, and the goal is to publish that podcast right when the code is activated.
Perfect.
And I actually forgot the last time we had a code to use it because I need some new melon caps. This time I will definitely take advantage of this.
Is there a melon hat that you have your eye on, John?
There is. There's a new one out. It's probably going to sell out before next week's code, so I'll probably pull the trigger right now. But it's kind of like I forget what they're calling it, but it's black, and then there's a black and gray design on it that looks kind of like almost camouflage-ish, kind of like yours, but it's more like kind of cityscape looking.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Nice. One of my favorite melon hats is my snow camo. It's part of their trenches collection, more of the flat brim.
Okay.
I think that they have that now in a thermal style, which for the winter coming up would be awesome to have.
Yeah. Very cool.
All right. Well, I'll be using the code for sure.
Me too, Eddie. I'm going to get a couple of
Awesome.
couple of hats, and it's at a good time for Christmas because you'll be able to order and get the hats in before Christmas. So a lot of dudes are into melon hats. It's like our accessory.
Have you ever seen a woman in a melon hat?
No, but I would love to see a woman in a melon cap.
Why not?
She would get a lot of attention from guys that are like, I love your hat.
Yeah, like weird older pickleball guys.
Hey,
Maybe not the kind of attention you want.
that's true.
Well, we'll experiment with it.
Okay, I like it.
So we're going to jump into that Connor Pardoe interview.
Yes, indeed. With the magic of post-editing, let's jump into Connor Pardoe. All right, today on the KewCast, I have a special guest, Connor Pardoe. For those of you who don't know, he's only 30 years old, but has quite the impressive resume. Currently CEO at PPA Tour, also president of UPA, and president of Pickleball Inc., which is a holding company, I think, of Pickleball Central, Pickleball.com, and PickleballTournaments.com. Connor, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for taking the time. I'm sure you're busy.
And no, I'm a big fan. I listen to this on the way in from work. I've got like 3 podcasts I listen to. So obviously love listening. So I'm a big fan. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. What are the other 2 podcasts?
I mean, I like to listen to Jimmy and Tyler, even though Jimmy's pretty ridiculous. Tyler's pretty good. And then I'll listen to Zane and Thomas as well. But I know there's a few other podcasts that are out there, but you 3 are really the only ones I listen to personally. Yeah,
so I'm not going to go into like a deep dive on your background and kind of, who you are. You recently had an interview with Brian of Building Pickleball. Excellent interview. If anybody wants to know more about Connor and that aspect, then I'll link to that in the description. But my pod is more gear focused, so I thought you and I could sit down and talk about mostly paddles and the UPAA certification program.
Sure.
All right, Connor. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here, and that is UPAA paddle certification. So, there were some leaked Selkirk letters, a few weeks ago, and it kind of gave the impression of incompetence of the PPL, which is the lab currently running paddle testing at the PPA. And the letters, it made it seem like this is kind of a cash cow for the PPA and kind of making it impossible for startup companies and all of that. So, I wanted to get your perspective on this. Kind of what assurances can you give that the UPAA, so this new paddle certification program, will kind of soon have this set of rigorous certification procedures, sort of engineer-based, to address these claims in the Selkirk letters. And it's going to be as good as, or maybe even better than, what USAP is currently doing, creating their own sort of coefficient of restitution exit velocity testing. Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, no, I can. I think what's really important is to understand the why, and to, the reason why you do anything. First and foremost, we wanted to find a path forward to be able to work with USA Pickleball. We focused on that for a long time, and they used to come out to our events. They used to test paddles. They used to be involved even as a year ago. The World Championships a year ago was nationals, and these guys were there and they were helping test paddles. I think the problem that we had, and the most important thing is, and I think one of the most important things to think about here, is we're really focused about the pro game when it comes to certifying these paddles. And the problem that we were having is there was no way for me to actually look at people in the eye and say, I know with what's being played on the court that it's fair for everybody. There was no way for me to be able to do that. And that means the fans that care about it. That means the paddle manufacturers that want to make sure they're on an even playing field with all the other manufacturers. And obviously, most importantly, it means the pro players, the actual people that it's our product. And it was creating a lot of frustrations with people. We were going off this USA Pickleball stamp of approval that, quite frankly, really didn't mean anything. And so where we first started with is hey, we need to make sure that this is fair. We need to make sure that everybody's playing on an equal playing field. That's first and foremost, is making sure that everything is fair for everybody. And after it, we did about 6 months of research of trying to figure out how do we do this? What would it actually entail? And where we actually got was there's no one doing the right things that need to be done today. So unfortunately, we have to do it ourselves. Trust me, we've got enough businesses going on. We have enough stuff going on to where if there was someone competent testing the paddles, that would have been the easiest way for us to be able to move forward. But what we can't do is have people not playing on an equal playing field. Number two is the integrity of the sport in general. We've invested a lot of money in this game. Whether it be through pro play or through all sorts of, other ventures that we have in the space of pickleball. And we also need to make sure that we're helping the integrity of pickleball. And what I mean by that is making sure that there's controls around it that make pickleball as fun as it always is supposed to be. We don't want the game to get less fun. We also want to encourage innovation. So there's this fine line of where we're at. And we think, managing the pro tour, and we're not talking about amateur play here. When we talk about amateur play, if you have a USA Pickleball stamp, you're still going to be able to play in the amateur events. We're going to continue to follow their protocol. But when it comes to professional play, we believe that we're the stewards of the sport, and we want to make sure that we are helping grow the sport and maintain the integrity of the sport moving forward. No different than any pro sport. No different than the regulations that are in golf for the PGA or that are in Major League Baseball does for professional baseball. Or really any sport out there. There's not an amateur governing body that governs how the pros are played. It's the same way across every sport. So for us, when we thought about the UPAA, the only way for us to make sure that we do those two things was to have our own certification process, to have our own process for people to come through. And look, there's going to be a lot of paddles and a lot of manufacturers. It makes a ton of sense to work with us and make sure that we're following UPA protocol. But there's going to be a lot of people that are just focused on amateur pickleball as well, and it might not make sense for a lot of manufacturers, and that's definitely okay.
Yeah, thanks for those details. And I don't know how much in the weeds you are in terms of what's going on at the lab for the UPAA, but there was a statement just recently released. I'll kind of cover the gist of that, but it's for the 2025 paddle certification rollout plan. So right now they're using a deflection and spin. I'm not sure how they're capturing the spin, but talking with Jason, it sounds like eventually there will be a exit velocity test. I'm not sure if that's exactly the same coefficient of restitution that USAP is using. I know you're using a similar machine, but do you kind of visit the lab? Do you know much of the internal workings in the lab?
Yeah, I mean, the lab is super impressive. And the groups that we have involved and the people that we have involved, they're the same people that have done this in golf and baseball. And so like Tom Dundon and I were just on a call with them literally on Friday. And they were showing us all the robots that they have in there. Like they literally have a robot swinging a paddle. And there's been millions of dollars that have already been invested into making sure that we do this right. And again, it's because those first 2 points are so important to us. Integrity of the sport and fairness, making sure that it's fair. And so when we talk about like the timeline of you really should have Jason on here so he can take you into each step and really dive deeper, because this is what he does every single day. He wakes up every day and this is what he's focused on. This is one of very many things that I do, but it's something that's very important. So I am plugged in. But where we're at today is we have a provisional certification, and paddles are going to have that starting January 1st. The open enrollment period,
right.
On the pro tour, just for the pros. The provisional open enrollment period just barely ended on Friday. However, paddles can still apply for provisional certification. There's just going to be a rush fee that's charged by the lab, not by us. I don't know if it's $500, something like that. We basically need 2 weeks by the time you send a paddle in. And the Masters is the first event. That's kind of mid-January. So that's step number one, making sure that we have all of our ducks in a row in January. Full certification will go into place April 1st. The reason why we're giving a little bit more timeline through Q1 is we want to make sure paddle manufacturers have more than enough time to make sure that they can make the best possible paddle for their professional players, and also be able to have a plan to market it and be able to put it out in the wild to the public. So that's why that's going to be at April 1st. But those are kind of the two steps. Right now it's provisional, and then starting April 1st, it'll be the full certification.
Okay. And am I right? Is my understanding correct? And the provisional is going to be deflection, spin. And then after April 1st, the full certification will involve, the robot arm, the coefficient of restitution, exit velocity, and all that.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that'll be exciting to see. It's
and so that's ready, by the way, too, which is cool. Like we're ready to go. It's just we need to give paddle manufacturers enough time. So the only reason why what we're waiting on right now is, one, we're ready to test for it all. We're ready to go. Two, we need to make sure we give them time. But where we're at today is trying to decide where we draw that line. So, here's the average of where paddles are being tested right now. That's what got presented to Tom and I last week. This is where this actually sits. So the question is we've got to get together with our group of professional players, our group of paddle manufacturers, and also our shareholders at UPA, and be able to decide, well, here's the average of where we're at. Here's some of the paddles that represent those. Where do we think this line should be? Should it be here? Should it be here? And my guess is things are going to come down ever so slightly, but we'll see.
That's been a hot topic lately. How much power is too much power for the game? Is there a paddle, speaking personally, is there a paddle that's currently approved that you think is too powerful for the sport of pickleball?
There is. I don't want to go into specifics on who they are. But there is paddles that are being played in the market that I think probably are too powerful. The argument to this also is that the game's never been more fun to watch. So I think we're kind of getting to this point where there will be a paddle that's too powerful, and I think there is a couple on the market right now that probably fit that. But at the same time, pickleball is so much funner to watch than it was a year ago. And so we're trying to balance both those two things, and it's a tricky line. It's a fine line. I mean, what's your opinion? Do you believe that paddles are too powerful right now, or do you think we should just be leaning towards more innovation?
My opinion is pretty much in line with, I think, the majority of amateur players and probably pro players too. I think that, yes, there are a couple of paddles out there right now that are just too much, especially in the hands of a pro or even amateurs. They're dangerous, right? If
Will
you're
you
not
say what
wearing
paddles they
safety
are?
glasses. Yeah, I mean, so we've got Gearbox, we've got the Yola Gen 3s, which are no longer approved, but the 3Ss are a little dialed back. I'd say those are fine. But the Mod TA15, which is approved, is basically the same as the Yola Gen 3. So I'd say the Gearbox Pro Power and the Mod are, and then the upcoming Ripple, Rhombus Ripple is going to be really hot also. So those, right on the boundary, I would say just above the boundary of what I think is, and this is personal opinion, what I think is acceptable for the sport. And the reason why I say that is in amateurs, you're going to win a lot of free points just by banging the ball. And a lot of those balls are going at the face because amateurs don't have as good of accuracy as pros. And at the pro level, I just think also like we're seeing the game change, and I get your point that it's never been more fun to watch. I think part of that also is that the skill level is higher than it's ever been. And that in large part to the fact that now being a professional pickleball player, you can do that professionally full time. You don't have to have a full-time job on the side because you're paying players, professional wages now.
A lot of money. $30 million, a lot of money. A lot of money.
Right.
But I agree with you. Like, so that match that you watched me play before on Sunday out on the main court when we were playing around, we were playing the Yola mod. Is it T15? TA15?
TA15, right.
After, Jason was like, hey, let's go get those tested and see if those would pass professional regulations. Both of them failed miserably. Right? So it's like,
right.
I get what you're saying. Like the Gen 3S is definitely pulled back, but it was my first time really playing against paddles like that. And you can tell the difference. Like you definitely can. The ball's just on you a lot quicker.
And, people look, so I have a database with paddle stats, and then I record miles per hour and serves and punch volleys and that sort of thing. And it's not a big difference in terms of the speed coming out the paddle, but every mile per hour makes a huge difference on the court, especially when you're standing 14 feet away from your opponent. And I know paddles really well, but even playing in the tournament at Worlds, going up against somebody with a Gearbox Pro Power that's broken in, they start not as powerful, they get more powerful. The serve came at me and it's just like, it was on me before I could respond. So, there's just like human reaction time can be limited.
100%. I think a big part about this too that I don't think anyone's talking about but us right now is what is a life of a paddle? And trying to, that will be one of the certification requirements as well, is thinking of destructive testing. That's something that Jason spent a lot of time on that I don't think USA Pickleball or anyone else is really talking about. And like your example right there with what you said, like a gearbox comes out fine, but what is the life of a paddle before it becomes not fine? And part of the certification process we'll have is the paddle will have to make a certain timeline to be able to be approved in the first place. So just because it comes out good out of the box doesn't mean that it's going to be that good a week from now. And so actually being able to understand what is the lifetime of a paddle and what does it do over its life cycle, and at no point can it go above that line that we put in. And so if a paddle starts here and it comes like this when it comes to power or spin or whatever, if it ever breaks that line, we can't let that paddle come in play. Really good manufacturers, what they're going to do, at least if I was a business owner making a paddle, what I'd like to see is when my paddle comes out of the box, if my line's here, my paddle's here, and it goes here, right? So right when it comes out of the box, you know what you're getting. You're the expert. That's probably is harder said than done, actually manufacturing it. But if there is some kind of bell curve when it comes to power and spin, you're going to need to make sure you start here and get here, but you don't actually cross that line. That's the only way we can make sure that what's being used out there, we actually have the proper controls in place.
Yeah, 100%. I think destructive testing is a complete necessity with paddle certification because, you can make paddles that start right at the limit and they're going to show X percentage of increase in power over the course of their life. And then there's, like you said, there are paddles that have the opposite trend where they start and they simply drop in power as you go. But yeah, I think good to see that UPAA is considering and creating a program that uses destructive testing. Back to the UPAA and kind of the concerns, that raised in the Selkirk letters and in general. Can you tell us when the UPA will become a 501c3 nonprofit, and is there a plan for that? I did hear there is a plan for that. People are claiming there's a conflict of interest, and that would kind of ease people's perception of this being kind of a moneymaker for the PPA. I've heard you talk about it with Brian and others, but I'd love to get your perspective on that.
I guess the way that we're looking at this today is with it being just focused at the pro level, with where it's at right now. I think anyone to say it's a conflict of interest, it's kind of it's a pretty silly thing to say. But where we're at today is it is a subsidiary of Pickleball Inc. It's its own company, but however, it is a for-profit entity. And the reason why it's structured like that today is in order for us to have a 501c3, it would have to completely be able to stand off on its own and be able to have no tie to what we're doing here. I said earlier, we have 250 people that are working here. Like right now where we're at, we need the same group that's doing the finance to be able to do the finance for that company. We need the same group that does the marketing to be able to do the marketing for that company. When Jason needs a website stood up, it's the same person that puts up the PPA Tour website and the Major League Pickleball website. Like there's so many things that it needs to get up and get going right now. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be a 501c3. With that being said, me personally, I would like to see this be a 501c3. I would like this not just to be at the pro level when we think about years down the road. I think there'd be a path for it to be a full certification and be able to be a full standalone 501c3. I'd like to see it get there. First and foremost, though, we need to focus on the pro game. We need to make sure we get it up, we get it going, that it's right. Once we get that, then we'll take a look at the rest of the scope and say, hey, does it make sense for us to be an all-encompassing governing body where we're focused on not just the integrity at the pro game, but we're focused on tournament certification, referee certification, tournament director certification. What does it mean to be an approved facility? Coming out with an actual referee program, which I think needs a lot of work, by the way. Like the training that's being done at just USA Pickleball, it's not cutting it to be a professional ref anymore. Like we need to have more in-depth, a referee program that's way more in-depth. And then I'd like to see amateur paddle certification rolled into that too at some point. When that happens, it needs to be a 501c3. It needs to be its own separate governing body. But right now, what we're really focused on is those two things that I said at the beginning. We need to make sure that one, we're making sure that there's fair, safe play for the professional players. And number two, we're protecting the integrity of the sport because we've invested a lot of money in this professional game. Once we get that right, we'll take a breath. We'll look at the other scope. And if we decide to do those things, it has to be a 501c3. There's no question. If we stay with it just with the pro game, there's no reason to be a 501c3.
All right, that's crystal clear. So as long as it's in the pro game only, it makes no sense to be a nonprofit. But once it goes into the amateur levels, then that's when it will become 501c3. So I think we can all agree that kind of having two governing bodies at the same time is confusing. Mm-hmm. Do you want the UPA to eventually be the only paddle certification organization in pickleball?
Look, I think USA Pickleball needs a lot of work. Hopefully it's getting better from where it was before. Because again, the stamp was definitely meaningless. I understand they've been trying to do their own stuff, and hopefully I'm sure you're up to date with that. And it sounds like they're making some progress. I think again, if we can get the pro piece right, I think it makes sense to be a full governing body and have everything roll under the UPAA 501c3. Right now, we're focused on getting the professional piece right. Until we get that right and we make sure that, and I think we do have it right, but until we have that right and we can actually take a second and breathe and make sure that everything's going well, then we'll focus on the rest. But if I was the person trying to predict what does the world look like 5 years from now, I think that everything would go through the UPAA.
Okay, so speaking to that kind of confusion that's going on right now in terms of having two organizations regulating paddles, in simple terms, how would you explain sort of to an amateur pickleball player what the stamps mean on paddles and where they can play with USAP paddle stamps versus UPAA stamps?
Yeah, I guess the easiest way to explain it right now, to play in a professional event, either Major League Pickleball or PPA Tour, That's going to include Major League Pickleball and PPA Tour, Australia, Asia, Europe, everywhere that we're going right now. In order to be able to play there, you have to have a UPAA stamp. And that stamp makes it 100% pro approved, whether it's the qualifiers or the main draw, whether it's a challenger level event or a pro event, you have to use a paddle that goes through a UPAA certification process. And the way is we know that stamp means something. We know that it's fair for everybody that's playing with those paddles. When it comes to being an amateur, you have a choice. You can use a paddle that is UPAA approved, and you can use it at all PPA and MLP events. And I'm sure recreationally it'll be accepted. And more organizations, I believe, will require a UPAA stamp. We're already seeing it internationally. People that want to have that mark because it means something. And so you can use that paddle, or if you have a USA Pickleball stamp would be an amateur approved stamp. If you're playing amateur events at the PPA Tour or Major League Pickleball, no problem. You can use the USA Pickleball sticker. So you really have an option as an amateur. You can either use what the pros are using and you know exactly what you're getting with that stamp, or you can use a USA Pickleball stamp. It really doesn't matter.
Okay, that clears it up. All right, Connor, so moving out of the kind of the paddle realm and
Sure.
UPAA, does this kind of reputation of big pickle concern you? Are you doing anything to kind of address it? Hey, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny the first time I heard it. I think Zane's the first one that coined it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it really hurts or helps, and maybe you know more about it than I do. I've heard it a few times floating around. I think there's benefits of the different various pickleball companies and being able to help add benefits across the way to each one of the companies. I'm not too concerned about the big pickleball, like the coining of big pickle, but interested to hear your take on it. It's the first time I've been asked that question, by the way.
Okay, really? That's interesting. No, I just, it gets thrown around a lot, and it was, a joke at first, but now I think, on forums now it's just kind of ubiquitous when people are talking about the PPA and Pickleball Central and all that. I mean, I don't really have any thoughts on it other than I've been to the PPA tour and as an amateur level, and I've seen it's a big organization for sure, but it needs to be to run these types of tournaments. Like I said, it's the smoothest tournament I've been in as an amateur, and at Worlds there were how many people were registered for Worlds to amateurs? 3,500, something like that.
Yeah, 3,500, and then we had about 140 pro players.
And such a massive thing to organize, and it ran smooth. So yeah, I understand the need for a big company. Anyway,
I think anyone can take a look at it. And when people were coining Big Pickle before, it was usually like with shortcomings, right? Oh, this is Big Pickle. They're just money hungry. They're like whatever it may be. I think the way to look at it is we're focused on so much more than I think what meets the eye. I think you can look at the PPA Tour and just say, like, how much better has it gotten over a year? Like, how much better has the amateur events got? How much better has the experience? How much has the experience gotten better? Like, look at the website, look at the social media. Like Pickleball TV, guess what, guys? That started a year ago. Like, we didn't have Pickleball TV a year ago, and look at how much better it is now to be able to have that. And I think we're focusing on a lot of things, trying to make sure that we deliver the best product possible. And I'm super proud with all the people that work here. They work their butts off every single day, trying to make pro pickleball pickleball in general accessible and easy and fun, and trying to grow the brand. And you take a look at where pickleball was. We were talking before the podcast started. Like, think about where this thing was in 2020. Like, you weren't doing this full time. It wasn't a job that you could do full time. Like, look at all these people that have careers. Like, there's you guys, there's the podcasters, there's the professional players. Like, I remember back then it was even hard to get a job in pro pickleball. Now we have close to 350 people that are working for us that are all part of this. And it's just growing. And not to mention, all the money that we spend to be able to produce these events and run these companies. And it's been really awesome to see the whole ecosystem and everything that's happened in just 5 years. And my guess is in 5 years, we're going to see a lot more growth in the next 5 years than we saw the previous 5 years. These next 5 years, like this is the very first time I've been able to look around this company and be able to say, wow, we've got the right people in the right places. We have the right KPIs. We have the right goals. And there's no more of this fighting. There's no more distractions. Like we're waking up every day and we're focused on growing the best business possible and trying to take pickleball to the moon. And that's a really fun place to be in. So much better than it was a year ago.
Do you have any, this is the last question for you, Connor. Do you have any sort of sneak peeks or previews of what we can expect for new things coming in the PPA, whether it be new cameras, new angles, new venues in 2025?
Yeah, sure. Production is something that we're obviously still super focused on. Like I hope people have really enjoyed the close call replay. I think that's been great. Hopefully in the not too distant future, we'd like to get to the point where lines are actually called electronically, which would be great. Big investment. But we think that's something that would be awesome. Maybe not at all events, but maybe like slams and cups. I think the other thing for people to recognize is what we're really focused on. And if you didn't experience Worlds, I know you did, and appreciate you talking about it on your last podcast. That really was a pickleball festival. It was a big, big event. What we're really focused on moving into next year is really having 4 distinct majors, 4 events that mean something more than just the PPA Tour stop. They look different. They feel different. There's a reason to be there. And so, the 4 majors are for us. One is the Masters in Palm Springs. That's a super great event. And we're spending a lot more money to make it more like an actual pickleball festival similar to Worlds. Number 2, we have Atlanta that we run at the Lifetime in Atlanta. We're going to be plussing that event up. Number 3, we have the Fountain Blue event in Las Vegas that we found a nice court solution. But that's an awesome tournament to be able to go to. And 4, we have the World Championships here in Dallas the first week in November. So really trying to create those as tentpole pillar events to the PPA Tour. That's something to look forward to next year when it comes out to bringing all the bells and whistles, bringing in the musical acts, really making it something so much more than just an average pickleball event. So that's something to look towards next year. Mm-hmm. And then actually looking at Major League Pickleball, which I'm so excited about and I'm seriously ecstatic, is next year, instead of us playing at random places like Kansas City to play a Major League Pickleball event, why would we go to Kansas City and play Major League Pickleball? There's no team in Kansas City. Like, why would we do that? And so what we're really focused on next year is our 10 regular season events will be hosted by a home team. So each event will be hosted by a home team. We have the mid-season tournament that will still happen at the Beer City Open, which will be awesome. And then our playoffs will be held in San Diego, which will be another blown-out event similar to Worlds, and then also New York. So I just think the overall structure that we're doing next year, where MLP is really focused in the summer. There's less PPA during that time. We have our 4 tentpole events for the PPA Tour. We have our 2 tentpole events for Major League Pickleball. Home events are now being hosted by teams. Everything's going to make more sense to the pickleball consumer. You're going to know, hey, the first part of the year leading up to summer is very PPA focused. The summer, we're doing the bulk of MLP. The back end is very PPA focused. I think everything's going to make more sense. The storytelling is going to be a lot better. And if you're planning out your pickleball schedule, those Grand Slam events are going to be ones that you want to circle and try to get to 1 or 2 of them because they're going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I'm already jotting down notes for my agenda next year. I'll be going to the 6 tentpole events that you mentioned. And I think it makes a lot of sense also to your plans for the MLP. That was one of the things that always confused me about MLP is, the association with places and teams being associated with those places. And I know the players, but it was always hard to keep up with which players were associated with which teams and where those teams were geographically. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But Connor, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed sitting down and chatting with you. Again, thank you for your time, and love to do this again sometime.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for everything.
Thanks so much. You have a great day.
Thanks.
And we're back.
This is exciting, John.
The next segment, yeah.
Yeah. 12 days of Christmas giveaway.
Yes.
So how's this going to work?
So the goal was I came up with the idea on Sunday, like I mentioned in the intro, and the goal was to give away 12 paddles, 4 each week for the next 3 weeks preceding Christmas. And I reached out to several companies, and they all said yes. And then the backups I had, and I thought a couple of people would be a no reply, and I thought some would be like, not this time, but everybody said yes.
That's amazing.
So we kept stacking these on. So the way it's going to work is we're going to give away 4 paddles this week. We're going to give away at least 4 paddles next week. And then the final week, I think this December 18th, this podcast airs on Wednesdays, we'll give away the rest of the stuff. Now, it's going to be more than paddles. And so the final week is going to be probably upwards of 10 paddles, maybe more, and some other stuff.
Ooh-wee.
Yeah.
Nice. So what are the 4 paddles this week? Do we know?
Well, I can tell you the participating companies so far.
Right.
So in alphabetical order, 11624, ADV Bags, Pickleball Apes, Bread and Butter, Chorus, Engage, Franklin, Gearbox, Yola, Kitchen, the bag company, Melon, Neonic, Paddletech, Pickleball Central, Proton, Rhombus, Selkirk, 60, Spartus, and Vatic.
That is a nice lineup.
That's a nice lineup. And the paddles they are giving away are not their Beeline.
Right. Last year's.
It's their most popular, most relevant.
That is exciting.
Paddles. So we're giving away some really, like all the recent reviews I've done, and anybody who's a paddle reviewer has been into, we'll have those paddles to give away. So I'm very, very grateful to all the companies who are participating. I've reached out to a couple of others, I think, that I haven't heard back from yet, but I imagine they will eventually get back before these 3 weeks are up. Another exciting bit of this is that Slice, the company that makes the Slice caps, speed caps, so the weighted caps that go on the butt of the handle, has agreed to provide a free cap for each of the first 12 paddles we give away. So you can choose whether or not you want the half gram or the full gram, and you give them your paddle model, whichever one you win, and they'll send you a cap for that. Similarly, Bodie is offering a 4-pack of overgrips for each of the first 12 paddles.
Oh, man.
Crown is offering a 3-pack of balls for each of the first 12 paddles. And we may have more people chiming in here.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Am I excluded from participating?
I'll just give you one, Eddie. Take your choice.
That is so cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, this week's giveaway. So first, before we get into the paddles, how do people enter to win, Eddie?
Yeah, so we are going to put a question in the comments of this YouTube video. And what we'd like for you to do is give us your answer to that question on your website.
Yeah. So I have a form linked to on my website where you go and enter your name, your email address, and it's all private. It comes straight to me. And then your answer to our question. We'll take everybody who answers correctly and put them into a bundle, and we'll use a random number generator
to pick our
I know
4.
my statistics
To pick 4.
to pick 4 fairly, so that those 4 I'll be reaching out to based on the email that you give me. You can also choose one or all of the paddles we're going to be announcing this week as which one you want. So in the comment also, you can tell me your favorite of the, I'm sure that if you have a choice, everybody's going to choose all 4, but some people might have a preference on one of these 4. So there'll only be one winner, obviously, per paddle. So 4 winners total this week. And again, this week you'll get the paddle, you'll get the Bodie overgrips, you'll get the Slice cap, and you'll get the pack of balls from Crown.
So the question of the week will be both in the YouTube video and on your website.
Okay. Do you want to save that? You don't want to read it out now?
Oh, well, I guess we could read it out now.
Yeah. Why not?
All right. Give me 2 seconds here.
Okay.
All right. Here's our question of the week, John. For the paddle giveaway, in episode 36 of this podcast, we talked about a pizza place you used to work at in college. What was the name of that pizza place?
Right on.
Easy peasy.
Love it. All right, so edit here. So Eddie and I were just discussing another fun way aspect of entering to win. So we've got answering the question on the form on my website, and I'd like for participants also to leave a comment in the comment section of the YouTube video, telling which of these 4 paddles is their favorite and why. Right.
Sure.
So to enter the win, instead of leaving your preference on the forum, I think it would be fun for people to kind of read each other's comments on why they're choosing one paddle over the other.
Yeah.
So that'll be another way that I can, help shuttle the winners into their respective paddles.
And John, I'd be curious to know what people are playing with now. If they have the time to put that in the comments,
I love
that'd be good to know.
There we go. We're making this more and more difficult for you. But yeah, let us know what you're playing with now, which one of these 4 paddles you prefer, and why.
Yeah.
I like it.
But help your own chances. Don't put the answer to the question in the comments.
Yes.
Leave that for John's website.
Don't spoil it. Don't spill the beans. Okay.
We're going to make all this make sense in post.
This be a long time editing. All right. So this week's paddles, we've got 4 this week. So 11, 6, 24. They have agreed to let the winner choose whatever paddle they want out of their inventory.
Okay,
So if
perfect.
you like the Monarch All Court, it's yours. If you like the Hirachi X, then it's yours.
What would you pick out of their line?
I'd go with the Monarch All Court. All Court, yeah. How about
Okay,
you?
I'd go with the Monarch Control.
Control, okay.
Yeah.
I think they still have some, but they're discontinuing that.
Oh.
It wasn't there. The Kevlar surface wasn't there.
Okay,
Wasn't working for them, so
that was working for me.
yeah. I like that one too. All
that's number 1. Number 2?
24. Number 2 is Pickleball Apes has agreed to give away one of their Pulse series paddles. So you have 3 options there. You just tell them which shape you want. But it'll be a Pulse series. That's the latest one I reviewed. It's a very popular paddle. It's a lot of people love this. And they have the E, which is their hyper elongated. They have the S, which is their technically a hybrid shape. And then that's the one. And then they have the V, which is their wide body.
This one's sold out.
Is that sold out right now? Okay. So you can, if you win this paddle, you can, tell them which shape you prefer. Any one of the 3 shapes.
And what would you pick? The V.
The V.
Again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've become a wide body player. I just can't. The size of that sweet spot. So I was playing with Tom today, and he's playing with the Apes Pulse.
Elongated.
Elongated,
right.
yeah. And he's loving it, but he's using it because I gave it to him. And I traded with him today, and he played with the V, and he's like, "Oh my God, the sweet spot on this thing is I can't miss the ball."
It's like a dinner plate, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. All right, number 3, Chorus. So they're giving away their newest addition to their lineup, the Chorus Fire, their power paddle. And again, similar to the Apes, you choose your shape on that. And they also have 3 shapes.
HX.
HX is their hybrid. They have elongated, and they have a wide body also. Okay. I think the HX is becoming the most popular out of the reviewers too. I'm kind of split evenly between the HX and their SX, their wide body. I just haven't had enough time with them to tell, but I did like that HX. They're so lightweight, you got to put weight on them. But anyway, Let's move on. Number 4, Gearbox is going to give away a Pro Ultimate Hyper, their newest standard shaped paddle, the one I just reviewed. Excellent paddle and an expensive paddle too, $275. They're giving that away, and with it, I forgot to put this in my notes, but they're giving away a bunch of little extras. So they're doing the edge tape. They're giving away, I think it's 3 overgrips, Gearbox overgrips, and a box of their balls, the GB1. Is that the one? What else? So that's 3 or 4 balls. Maybe, I think they have lead tape too. I think they're throwing in some lead tape. So there are a lot of accoutrements with the with the Gearbox paddle. Okay, so again, 4 paddles this week.
Is it the only the hyper shape that's part of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Gearbox Hyper. Ultimate Hyper. So 4 paddles, 11, 6, 24. Any model, any shape. Pickleball Apes Pulse. any shape of the pulse, chorus fire, any shape of the fire, and then gearbox pro ultimate hyper with a bunch of extras.
That is quite the lineup.
Good
I like
stuff. All right. Leave your comment of which these you prefer and what you're currently playing with in the comment section. Go to my website with the link I'll provide in the description and enter that form, providing your name, email, and answer the question about which was my pizza joint that I worked at in college from episode 36, was it?
Yep.
36.
Yeah,
Okay.
good luck, y'all.
Yeah, this will be fun. And we'll announce the winners of these 4 paddles on next week's podcast.
Sounds good.
All right, we hit with some paddles this week, Eddie. Today, in fact, and we've been hitting with these for more than today, but you and I hit with them together. Do you have a preference on what we start with?
Let's start with Selkirk 007.
So we talked about the 14 mil 007, and they didn't send the 10 mil to me until last week, literally. So finally got to hit the 10 mil, and I think of the two, this is their more popular
Is it?
choice. Yeah, it's a more manageable swing weight. The 14 is heavy. I think the swing weight is over 120, and stock. And then you want to add lead to that or tungsten, it just gets super heavy. So this one, I think, is the one that Catherine Parento is playing with. I don't know if any other Selkirk pros are playing with these. Nevertheless, we got to hit with it today. I forgot to hit with it next side by side with the 14, but Eddie, what are your thoughts on it?
It's practically invisible in side profile. It is so thin.
Yeah,
It's
ridiculous. The thinness. I mean, there are 10 millimeter paddles out there that have edge guards. As far as I know, this is the only one without an edge guard. It's just like,
it's nuts.
how's this thing not snap in half?
Yeah. I'm sorry to say, it suffers the same problems as the thicker one, and that is just crazy vibration. The play experience on this paddle, it's not good. I actually played okay with it. I was driving the ball well with it. It's got great spin. I don't know how durable the new texture is, but it definitely is grippy. Performance-wise, what you get out of the paddle is, I have no complaints, but just the experience and the feel of it, I think it just suffers, whether it's that giant hole that's causing the vibrations coming through the handle or something else. It's hard to define it, but it's there, and it's not a great feeling.
Yeah, exactly the same experience as you. Don't like the vibrations. Small sweet spot. Perks are good spin. I do like the 10, I think, better than the 14.
I agree with that.
It's poppier. I think it's even more powerful. I was getting you hit that sweet spot and you get a lot of juice out of it, but the sweet spot is very small. Yeah. And we haven't played with this with tungsten around the perimeter. I'm sure that would help the issues, widen the sweet spot a little bit. So there's that. Whatever they're using for this grit does get really good spin. And I have been testing it. I've got a couple of the 007s out to different people, and they're logging hours. One came back with 20 hours on it. I'm comparing that to brand new Yola Perseus 3Ss. And one of those came back too, and I measured the spin, and there was negligible spin loss on both paddles. The Selkirk I was worried about because it felt smoother. Like these things new feel like really gritty. And the one that came back after 2 weeks was noticeably smoother compared to what it feels. The grit goes all the way around the edges compared to what it feels like on the edges and outside the sweet spot. And I was like, uh-oh, this is trouble. But it didn't lose any spin. So I think that's, what you're feeling with your hands is not as relevant as I thought it was. So need more time with this experiment. I'm giving these back to the players, and they'll bring it back after another 20 hours, so 40 hours total on each of these. It surprised me. I thought after 20 hours of consecutive play, any paddle is going to lose a good amount of spin. Neither, literally, they were almost exactly the same spin numbers as I was getting with them new. One issue might be temperature. I've noticed I get higher spin numbers when the temperature is cooler, which is counterintuitive because the ball is going to be harder, and you'd think it would slip off the paddle face easier, but that's not my experience. So that might be altering the numbers a bit. So Just an update on spin testing. But yeah, I mean, back to the performance of the paddle, not for me at all. I do think it's a slight upgrade over the Power Air, and especially if the texture and the grit does pan out to be more durable, then that's definitely a perk. And I hope that if they are successful with the durability of this texture, I hope it goes out to all their other paddles and it doesn't just stay in the 007 Labs, paddles.
Does that vibration bother you?
A lot.
Yeah.
I'm tuned in a lot to paddle vibration. That's why I like the Gearbox Ultimate Hyper so well, because right away when I hit it, I was like, ooh, that feels like butter. There's no vibration in this. This one's just like, bang,
Could you overlook that if the performance of this paddle was just superior?
I could definitely get used to it. I mean, tennis rackets also vibrate, not as bad as pickleball paddles. There's a harsher vibration in pickleball paddles that isn't there in a tennis racket. But tennis rackets bend. That's another thing I didn't like about this. I like my unibody design not to bend on my paddles. But tennis rackets get a lot of bend, and some people like that. Like if you come from a tennis background and you hit this 007, you might like the bending aspect of it, but those vibration frequencies are harsh in my opinion.
I like it when a paddle face can create that dwell time via kind of a pocketing of the ball. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the Selkirk is trying to achieve that in a different way, and it's through an entire frame flex. And it's not a technique that's working for me. Agree. But I did like the performance of it. I think it's an adequate paddle.
Yeah, it's not bad. You played well with it today. I'm so used to my Apes oversized sweet spot that it's kind of the opposite of playing with the sweet spot trainer. It's making me sloppier, I think.
Yeah, okay.
But, I could hone it in if I forced myself to and played with this paddle. But today I hit with it for a couple games, and I want to say that I hit maybe half a dozen shots where I felt like that was right in the middle of the sweet spot.
I think part of this is you're going from one of the best feeling paddles on the market today in the Pulse, to one of the worst feeling ones in the Selkirk.
The most forgiving to the least forgiving.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, let's move on. Body Helix. They have this new program, the Flik program, and kind of the goal of it is to be able to experiment with different paddles that aren't necessarily going to either be submitted to USAP for certification, or B, or out of spec because they want to experiment with different things. They're not into the power game, They'll give us power if we want it, but that's not their driving force. It's not like they want to juice a paddle out of this world and get people hurt on the court. That's not their jam. What their jam is, though, is I kind of like this too. Is they're like, okay, why is the current rule at USAP a combined length width of 24 inches? Why can't it be 25 inches? So they put out this the size matters paddle. Do you have the specs on this? It's 17 inches by 8 inches, I want to say.
Right.
So it comes out to
super long handle.
25 inches, right? Super long handle. And you may not see it on the camera so easily. It might look like but when you hold it, you're like, oh, that's a big paddle.
I don't think anyone would notice just if you had shown up to a court.
No. We played with it today and nobody was like, that paddle's out of spec.
John, come on, you know better.
Yeah. So let's talk about this one first. So it's a 14 mil, and again, elongated and standard width. So interesting combination and a long handle.
Yes.
Interesting combination of stuff. First off, the peel ply texture on this is really gritty.
It's one of those paddles that'll just stick to you.
Yeah. I mean, not. It's not gonna. It's not.
That's
not
pretty
like the
grippy,
Yolas, but it's pretty grippy. It's getting great spin with it. It is a Gen 1 paddle, so I felt for a 14, it felt soft and definitely more control oriented.
Yeah.
But with the 17 inches in length and the long handle, you can really get a lot of torque with this thing. And I was getting a lot of leverage. And with the full swing, you can hit the ball pretty hard with it. It's not going to be a poppy paddle at all.
It's got to be pretty high in the swing weight, though.
Very high. I think it's over
120.
130.
130.
Yeah. The thing is, you can adjust that by choking up on the grip a lot. So if you're all the way down at the bottom, you feel every one of those 130 swing weights. If you're choking up a couple inches, it takes off probably 5 to 10 numbers on that swing weight. But yeah, I thought it was fun and massive sweet spot. You feel like you can't really miss with this thing.
I actually felt like the sweet spot was bigger on the other one.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this?
Who is that for, John?
This?
Yeah.
I think it's for.
I mean, you're not going to go to even an open play and play with something like that.
I mean, I think it's forgiving enough for a beginner to pick up for sure and then be happy with it. And I had fun with it. I would be worried playing with this that I would get used to it and not be able to go back to a normal size paddle.
Yeah. So in respect of a beginner picking up something like this, is that the right move?
I don't think it's going to screw up their game by any means. I mean, but it's debatable, right? Mm-hmm. Are you losing accuracy because the sweet spot's so big, and since it's not certified, since it's not approved on the approved list, eventually you're going to play in a tournament, and if you have to go down to a smaller paddle, your game's going to suffer. Yeah, that's part of it. But I think in the spirit of experimentation is where Body Helix is coming at this. And if it became a hugely popular paddle and everybody's like, why in the world didn't we ever have paddles at this size? Then you could petition USAP to potentially change this arbitrary rule. I don't know. That might be one of the goals.
So. I remember in golf has a club head size limit of 460 cc's, I guess. Okay. And manufacturers started experimenting with larger than spec club head sizes just to say, this is going to be great for beginners. Why are we stuck with this for the people who are just out to have fun on a Sunday? Okay. Yeah. And those people just ended up getting rasped by their
their peers.
To such a degree that quickly went away.
Yeah, I just see that happening. And I can tell you, like, almost with 100% certainty that unless there is a huge public demand for changing the regulation for the size of a paddle, if Body Helix went to USAP and was like, hey, can we change this? They'd be like, right. Like the emperor from...
Right. Similarly, do we see people using the diadem vise?
Yes, in the older people arena,
and maybe that's the use case for this.
Yeah. Take it to a rec center. Mm-hmm. Let the people there play with it, and I'm sure nobody would mind. But I think it's fun to experiment with this. I was really interested to see how it played, and it would surprise me how forgiving it was. But interesting that you didn't feel that way.
I was super excited to when Fred sent the email saying we're going to get these. I'm like, this is going to be so fun. I can't wait to get my hands on this shield that's going to be just massive. Right. It's going to be great. I'd love to experiment with stuff like that. And it was fun. Mm-hmm. But I was actually blown away by the other model he sent, which I think is it will be approved soon.
It's on. If I remember correctly, Fred told me that it will. They're getting it USAP approved, and it's a Gen 3 paddle. Similar, so it's got some edge foam enhancements. I think it's very similar to its layup as the Ace Heart.
Much more forgiving.
Much more forgiving, but it's not
consistent. It's not.
I wouldn't call it a power paddle necessarily.
Nope, it's definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it too. I wasn't. I'm gonna need more time with it. I wasn't immediately like, this is my favorite paddle in the world, but I was like, oh, solid performer. Not what I thought it would be. I was thinking Gen 3 power, foamy feel. It's pretty crisp. Mm-hmm. It might loosen up, but yeah, it's like, I think you're right. It's very consistent. It does have a big sweet spot too.
I've played with a lot of Body Helix. In fact, I've taken some to tournaments, but this is my favorite of their line.
Okay. Yeah, and that's saying a lot because you loved that X5 with the gold Kevlar.
Yeah, but doesn't quite have the spin of that, but in terms of just consistency and feel, this paddle is up there for me.
I'm going to pull up the email from Fred to get a little more detail on this because I can't even remember what the facing materials are. All right, so the details on this Flik, it is a Gen 3 paddle. Core thickness is 16 millimeters. Oh, yeah, one of the things I forgot he told me is the core is a black core similar to Engage, and it's got this what he's calling a dynamic support frame. So I imagine it's 2 layers of edge foam, very similar to the Ace Heart. The paddle size is 16 inches long by 7.7 inches wide. So interesting. It's a little bit more narrow than a standard paddle. This feels like an elongated paddle to me, or at least a hybrid.
Hybrid, I would say.
It does not feel like a standard shape. That's a trip because the handle's nice, and we'll get into the handles in the deep dive. But the handle on this is really nice.
It's so good.
I love the way it feels. I love the way it tapers up here and the crisp octagonal
and the firmness of it.
Yep. The handle length is 5.25. Why does it seem like a longer handle?
That does seem like a longer
paddle.
That's
wow.
Are you reading the right thing? Because that's got to be 5.5 at least, right?
Let's get a tape measure out because this feels way longer than 5.25, and it feels like a longer paddle. Okay, the surface is 100% Kevlar.
Okay.
Yeah, with peel ply, plus 2 layers of carbon. So woven Kevlar on the surface, 2 layers of carbon underneath. Oh, interesting they didn't go the
fiberglass.
Fiberglass route.
Yeah, I like it though.
I dig this. Yeah, so for a Gen 3 paddle, very much I'd put it above the Ace Heart in terms of the firepower, but somewhere closer to the Apes Pulse series for firepower, like right in the middle of all court, maybe slightly leaning into.
Were you picking up any Pulse vibes and just the feel?
Yeah, I could see it being comparable to the Pulse. Yeah, it's different. I can't put my finger on why it's different. I mean, first of all, it's a different shape, but yeah, I can see some similarities. It doesn't feel as foamy. It's not very crisp, but for what I thought it would be as a Gen 3, it's crisp. But so are the brand new Apes, but then they do break in to become softer and more dwell time. But yeah.
I don't love the branding, but otherwise, I'm all for it.
Just blue and white?
Well, that Flik logo on the other side of it.
Okay, yeah. What is this? Somebody put pine tar on my paddle? There's some, it's like maple syrup. My kids probably are eating pancakes next to the paddle.
Good stuff, though.
All right, yeah. I like what they're doing at Body Helix. I like his mindset. I think eventually they're going to land on something. I mean, maybe it's going to be this that is going to knock it out of the park.
They have been prolific in releasing new products and just trying different things, and you have to appreciate that.
Yeah. All right, last one.
That thing is crazy looking.
Aiso Ryu, I think is how you pronounce it. I love the look at this, and everybody that looks at it is like, whoa, that is a cool paddle, including my wife. Michelle was like, can I have that? Immediately, and she never is like enamored with paddle graphics.
It's definitely unique. There's no paddle like it in terms of those graphics.
No, not at all. And it's a mystery in terms of it's not a mystery in terms of what it's constructed of, but how it plays is nothing like I was expecting.
It's crazy.
So it's a Gen 3 paddle, first of all, and it's like $90 after code. So one of, if not the cheapest Gen 3 paddles. But you can see the shiny PET threads, so titanium, so polyester threads in the surface. It's a wide body, and it is a Gen 3, and I x-rayed this thing. It is crazy to look at on the x-ray. I was excited when I saw the x-ray because I was like, nobody's doing it like they're doing it. I'll show it in the B-roll, but instead of putting like a diving board like the Yolas and having the foam up here, they do have edge foam all the way around, but they cut the polypropylene out down here to accommodate like these massive areas of foam down on the neck and at the 4 and the 8 o'clock position. So the foam is down in the closer to the handle, right? So it's just kind of the opposite of what the Yola Gen 3s are doing, and unlike anything else I've seen. So I was really excited. And with all the foam in there and with the PET threads and with the wide body, I was like, this thing's going to hit like a pillow, maybe with some power. It's going to be lots of dwell time, super soft. Not so.
They should call this paddle the Paradox
the
or
Paradox,
something,
yeah, I like
something
it.
like that.
So very stiff, very crisp, but not necessarily in a bad way. Like if you love dwell time and you're like, it's dwell time and softness for me, or bust. Then this is not going to be your paddle. And there's some vibrations in it, but I didn't feel like bad vibrations, just the crisp kind of vibrations.
It's very stiff.
Very stiff. But it is a wide sweet spot, especially for a 14 millimeter paddle. And similar to the Flik, it just felt predictable for me. And I'd like to try it with some weight on the perimeter too, probably like toward the top to kind of offset the weight down on the bottom, because I feel like it's a very head light paddle because of all the foam toward the bottom pushing the balance
I would
point
not
down.
have expected there to be that much foam or any foam in there, actually.
Yeah. I mean, look at that. It's a pretty paddle, right? I hope you were out of focus part of the time last week. I hope I'm not screwing it up. There we go. You're back in focus.
That's a great shape, too. The handle is fantastic.
Yep.
I was doing stuff with this paddle today that I didn't think I could do, but
It spins great, too. I dig it. I want more time with it. I don't know if I'll do a dedicated review, but I mean, for the price,
$90
and the performance, yeah, after code, I think it's $90. Under 100, that's pretty ridiculous.
just get 3.
I mean, it's definitely so wide body. It gives me vibes of the Spartus Apollo. I always get the Apollo and the Olympus screwed up, but I do like the shape better than the Apollo. The slight curvature on the top doesn't give it the pizza peel look as badly. There might even be. I don't think there's a flare. I think that's a thing in the past. The flares on the paddles. I mean, flares do look nice, but it does cut into the twist weight a bit. It's not necessarily
Maybe a little one.
possibly hard to tell. Anyway, solid performer. It's 15 millimeter. Sorry, but I agree with you. The handle looks great. It feels great. We'll open it up here in a second and see what it looks like. But yeah. I'm pretty impressed.
Great choice. I mean, if somebody said, "How do I spend $90 and get a great paddle?"
Yeah,
this would be near the top of the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Good stuff.
All right, good sir. Let's move into our gear deep dive.
Yeah.
We want to open up. We're going to talk about handles today, and just like what we like in a handle and what the handles actually look like when you take the grip off. And heck, I remember when I first started playing around with paddles and like over gripping them, I always always nervous to take off the grip of a paddle just because I thought, oh, I'm going to screw this up or I'm not going to be able to put it back on. So just seeing it done is going to show people that haven't done it yet how easy it is to do. It is super simple. You're not going to screw it up unless you somehow, you take a knife and slice it straight down the middle.
And for all my personal paddles, I do this on every single one.
Yeah.
Without fail.
Yeah, and it's a necessity when we're doing reviews of a paddle to see what's under that. And it can tell you a lot about the paddle construction just looking under the wrap of the handle.
Well, what brought up this topic today, John, was we were playing with these Flik paddles today, and you would think that their handles would be identical, and they are
Night and day.
They are crazy different.
Yeah.
So we could start by actually opening up a
like
couple of
that.
these and see how it looks. I've
Yeah.
got mine started already.
Okay, gotcha.
And since I'm going to regrip them anyway.
All right.
So this is that oversized plus model.
Yeah, and that is a Gen 1 paddle. So
And
it's
when you feel that,
cold pressed.
it's got some sharp edges on it.
there's very sharp edges, which is not necessarily a bad thing unless they're like pokey sharp, but then it's squishy on the sides, which is kind of typical for a Gen 1 paddle. I don't think it's totally exposed polymer.
Squishy in this section right here.
Yep. I don't think it's totally exposed polymer. I think they put a strip of something. But that's just going to be part of Gen 1 construction. Because Gen 1 is just they take polypropylene and cut it into a shape of a paddle, and then they add components of the handle over that. So the core is carried down into the handle. So you're always going to have kind of a soft
I
part.
don't know if you can see that, but they've actually got a little bit of overwrap
Yeah.
on top of their.
Do you want to dig in further? That's one annoying issue is when the epoxy from the back end of the. Oh, that's what's covering the. Oh, they've got a couple of covers for the polymer.
This handle was really thick, and this is why they've got a couple layers of
Okay, interesting.
extra.
Okay, so not a bad design actually for a Gen 1 paddle. So you've got PU pallets, so polyurethane pallets, which are good. And then not only did they double wrap it with tape to kind of cover the edge guard, they've got Well, it's just a really light foam. That's why you could feel That's why you could feel the polymer.
Yeah, so they covered up the polypropylene core with just a really thin layer of foam. And that foam is actually missing or degraded in some of the sections of this handle.
Okay.
So you can actually feel these holes right here
through the hand,
through the grip tape. Yeah. And that's not the best feeling. Very squishy on the sides.
Yeah, I do commend them for the PU pallets. That's an upgrade over the squishy foam pallets. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice to stick something harder over the exposed polymer on the edge here. And then if you're putting on a slice cap, this is the stock butt cap, and they all come with like plastic butt caps. So you got to kind of peel the epoxy back, and there are staples in this. If you want to replace this with a slice cap, you got to pull the staples out.
Yep.
And get this thing off. Okay, so Gen 1 construction.
Yep. Now
handle.
check out this other Flik model.
Ooh, that's nice. That is fully molded.
That's fully
polyurethane. And I like what they did with the shape of it too. So we got polyurethane, two components that are kind of clamped together, and then they've tapered the top of it. And that's what I was feeling. I love, you need the butt cap to expand a little bit to keep your hand on the paddle.
Yep.
But I like being able to put my two-handed backhand around this tapered part. It just feels good but that's super
perfect.
solid.
Right?
Yep. I mean, you can't get much better than this handle. And it's not, I don't know how much they cost at the factory to upgrade from, the squishy foam pallets to this, but I can't imagine it's going to be a huge expense.
Whatever it is, it's worth the money.
And it's worth the money. I mean, pass on the extra $5 per paddle.
And this one also did not have that sort of intermediate, I don't know what you call this. It's not grip tape. It's just kind of a spacer, really.
Yeah.
Kind of a handle thickener, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was an intentional thickener or just more of an effort to cover the polymer on the sides of the paddle.
That could be.
But either way, I mean, it did serve a little bit to cover the polymer, but not enough.
But it made that handle of the Plus a little bit unwieldy in thickness.
It's thick.
Yeah. This one here, perfect.
That's a good
4 1/4, I'm guessing, which is standard, and it just feels so firm and nice.
Yeah. All right, let's open up the Ryu, because I did love the feel of this paddle. Any predictions on what it is?
I think we're going to see some of this.
Now that I'm pressing my thumb into
it soft?
I feel like it's squishy. I feel like it's a thermoform paddle with the carbon fiber strip down the side, and then it's got I think it has foam pallets, but they're very dense foam. Anyway, well, let's see. So if you're starting new, if you've never taken off a grip, the first thing to do is to take off this little rubber collar. You just literally pull it off, and then there's going to be like electrical tape. And you just find the edge of it and use a knife or an X-Acto knife or something. All right, so just get the tape off. The tape's going to lead directly to the overgrip. Just keep taking it off. This one has a lot of epoxy sticking to the handle. Part of the Gen 2 construction, so the thermoforming construction, is they use the reason why they're called unibody is because they're using a strip of carbon fiber that goes around the entire perimeter. Sometimes it even wraps around the base. We'd have to take the butt cap off to know for sure, but typically it just ends and you can actually see the core when you take the butt cap off. But this is sealed with heat and pressure, and it seals the entire paddle. So we have carbon fiber strips on the edge, and then they put these pallets on each side of the handle basically to create that octagon. And this one is in fact a squishy handle. So, not the highest quality handle. It does feel good. And some people may like this squishy feel. Not my preference, but overall for $90, you can't really complain.
It's some of the more denser foam that I felt, though.
Yeah. You want to see it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not terrible. Let's work on that paddle tech.
All right, Paddle Tech is another Gen 1 paddle. So it's not thermoformed. We're not going to find the carbon fiber seam. I got one over here. One modification you can do immediately if you don't like thick handles and the handles feeling too thick for you, and you like stiffer feeling handles, is you can take the stock grip off and then just put 1 or 2 overgrips, because the overgrips are going to be thinner than the stock grips.
Definitely my preference.
Yeah,
I don't keep those stock grips because invariably they're all too squishy.
So, I mean, kudos to Paddle Tech for covering their polymer with a hard plastic, so you're not feeling the polymer through the handle. but interestingly, their pallets they're using are a very light wood. I mean, it feels okay. I wouldn't call these the best handles on the market by any means, but it's odd to me that they're carving it out of wood. You'd think it'd be easier and cheaper to do it out of polyurethane.
Right.
It's like, do they have a wood shop in the back of Paddle Tech? They're
Of
planing the wood.
trees out back.
Right.
It's bizarre to see wood in a modern paddle.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it makes sense in terms of it's lightweight. It's firmer than the foam, which is a perk, but just like wood is just so odd to see in a paddle.
And what is this side strip?
It's some kind of hard plastic.
Just plastic.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel carbon-like.
No.
And this is not a hard wood. This is actually a pretty soft wood.
It's just a very
balsa wood.
low grade. Is it balsa? I feel like it's a low grade wood.
Yeah.
To get the lightweightness to it. What else should we take apart to see what's under the handle? Let's do a ripple. I found something in the X-rays of the ripple. I was going to save it for the review, but maybe I'll reveal it here. Maybe we'll see it. We'll see if we'll reveal it based on whether or not we can see it when we take the handle out, the grip off the handle. So this one is also a very dense foam. This is the densest foam I've felt. I would have never thought it was foam rather than polyurethane. But I'm not seeing what I saw in the X-ray on the surface, so it must be under the pallets. I'll tell you that there is some weighting. Not on that shape. Only on the R1 shape, which is their elongated shape. There is weighting in the handle of those.
All right.
Yeah, which I found in the X-ray.
This is significantly denser, though, than the foam in this one.
Yeah,
so
and that's even a dense foam.
Not all apples.
So there are grades of foam pallets for sure.
Should we do a forged carbon?
Yeah. So I mentioned, and it was actually, I'd forgotten when I was doing the narrative for the Gearbox Ultimate Hyper, which has a fully molded carbon fiber handle. Handle on that thing feels great. And in the video, I had forgotten that other paddle companies do that, and I said that as far as I know, this is the only paddle company that does it. Not true. There are others, and in particular, like the thermoformed Selkirk paddles that they manufacture in China. This Chinese factory makes fully molded carbon fiber handles. So instead of the polyurethane handles, they're using basically carrying down the frame of the handle, the frame of the paddle into the handle. We also saw this with the Babolat paddles, which are made in the same factory. Remember when they showed us the video of how they thermoform their paddles?
Do you like the way this handle feels?
I do.
Me too.
I mean, it doesn't get any more solid than
that's
molded
that's
carbon
pretty
fiber.
that's pretty sophisticated right there.
Yeah. So we've got the frame basically being carried down into the handle.
That is gorgeous.
Nice handle.
That is good. I could play with this without a grip.
So there we go. We got Gen 1 paddles, which have pallets and the cores carried down through, and sometimes if they're not careful, you get exposed polymer in the sides of the handle. We've got Gen 1 paddles like the Paddle Techs, which are a little more sophisticated. They've got hard plastic covering the polymer, but they use, strangely, wood pallets. We've got Gen 2 paddles, which are thermoformed, which have the strip of carbon fiber going down all the way from the edge through the sides of the handle. And then they put either foam pallets or polyurethane pallets. Sometimes you get polyurethane pallets on top and bottom. Other times you get a fully molded polyurethane handle where there are two pieces that connect in the center. And then we've got, by the way, Gen 3 paddles are made in the same way. They're basically thermoformed with foam enhancements. So that's the same type of handle in a Gen 3 as a Gen 2. And then we've got thermoform paddles, which carry down the frame of the paddle into the handle, and they're fully molded carbon fiber. As far as I know, that's the extent of the diversity. Well, there are outliers. So we've got the Thompson paddles, which are a unique way of making a handle that so far nobody's really liked the handle on those. So I think they are modifying that, and I know they are. And yeah, otherwise I think the Owl has a really weird, not good handle. The the crazy shield paddle, the birds.
That doesn't count.
That doesn't really count, but that's a different way of making a paddle. But yeah, I just thought we'd
That's a great rundown.
talk about the different
Terrific
handle
summary.
types. All right, let's move on to the next segment.
Tips of the week.
Oh, okay. I forgot about the tip of the week. Let's skip that for now.
All right.
Scott Fliegelman's going to join me for maybe a new segment, maybe like a new series, and he's much more capable of talking about that than me.
All right, let's jump into Q&A then.
Cool.
One of our frequent commenters, Ariana Wilson, left a question. Great podcast. I'm curious about players 4 or 5 plus. Do they prefer standard or hybrid shapes? And I think we know that that's more personal preference than anything.
Yeah.
But that kind of sparked a question in me, and that is, are there any pros who use a standard shaped paddle these days? Can you think of any pros or really high level players that are trending one way or the other on paddle shape?
Yeah, I mean, Colin Johns has always played with a standard shaped paddle. Anna Bright, I'd say it's more common in the women pros than men. But I've seen men experiment, other pro players experiment with standard shaped paddles. Fed Staksrud used the Scorpius for a while, and he went back to the Perseus. Can you think of any other men playing with a standard?
No, it seems like we see a lot of the hybrid and even elongated shapes. I mean, I think the classic is the kind of the Yola TA mod shape.
Yeah.
It seems to be very prolific.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've got Annalie Waters using a standard. We've got Coop using a standard. We've got Anna Bright using a standard. We've got Tyra Hurricane Black using a standard. Yeah, and when there's the interview I had with Ben and Colin and the other Yola pros, I asked them why they preferred the standard shape over the elongated shape or vice versa. And it's kind of the standard answer. It gives you a little more reach, the elongated shapes. You can play perhaps more aggressively because you get more leverage with the longer handle and the longer paddle in general. But I think that's going away. I think, okay, here's my hot take on this.
All right.
The reason why most men pro players use elongated paddles is a relic of the past because longer paddles used to be more powerful. Not true anymore. Look at the Ripple, the R2 Ripple. That thing hits harder than any other paddle on the market, the newer ones anyway, and it's standard shape. Look at the Annalie Waters paddle tech. Look at the ESQ, which is what Coop uses. I think that it's a relic of the past, and now that we've reached parity in terms of firepower with wider paddles, it's just habit, and what they're used to playing with is why they're still playing with the elongated paddles. You're not going to see Ben Johns switch shapes willy-nilly, probably never, because he's got his game dialed into that one shape. Come hell or high water, he's gonna use that 16.5 by 7.5 inch paddle, nothing else. And I think once your game is at that level where you're dialed in so much to one particular paddle, it's going to be hard to change.
Yeah. Now, you personally have pretty much completely converted to a standard wide body.
Definitely my preference over anything else.
Yeah.
I still can play with hybrid, and I'm happy to play with hybrids. And in fact, like I said, the Fire, Course Fire, I can't decide which is my favorite between the hybrid and the wide body shape on that one. But yeah, I do like the wide bodies. Good question, though.
Yeah. One more question, and then we can call it a day. This one's from Ramon Hearns, 3839. Is it difficult for you guys to select the right paddle because you see so many and you get confused? So my follow-up on that is, how do we go about sort of our testing process when we get so many paddles, and how do we get to our short list? So maybe you could take the first crack at that one.
So how do we get to a short list from choosing from so many
Yeah,
paddles
exactly.
that are sent in?
Do you ever get paddle analysis paralysis?
I mean, if it was a level playing field and every paddle that came in had just as much potential as other paddles to be a good or bad paddle, then I think it would be really hard to winnow down that list. But occasionally you get a surprise and you get this paddle that performs really well, but do you also know what to expect based on the company and what they put out in the past and what the technology of the paddle is coming in? So you kind of know, and I'm also guided by like, this isn't just about me. Like there is the court of public opinion, and some paddles generate more interest than others, and I'll have to focus on those because I want to give people answers to what questions they have about paddles. But in terms of like totally grassroots, like when a paddle just surprises me, it happens pretty rarely. But when it does, I love it. When a paddle breaks out of obscurity and becomes a popular paddle. And I want to give as many chances as I can to any companies who are producing good paddles to compete with the bigger companies, right? But yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer, convoluted answer. How about you?
I would say what you just said is one of the thrills of this job that we have, and that is, we're not bound to any particular manufacturer. When something new comes about, whether it's from a big company or a no-name, being able to look at those technologies sort of at face value that's so fun.
Yeah.
Nobody knew about the shapeshifter. Nobody knew about the Hirache. Mm-hmm. They came out of nowhere because they did something different. And
right.
being able to showcase companies like that and technologies like that is just so fun.
Yeah, for sure. Same with Apes. They were a small company. Now they're bigger. And yeah.
So when you go to the court like we did today and we've got 6 paddles, how do you get there, man? Because it's like rapid fire sometimes.
It is, yeah. Part of it is out of necessity because I'm working on reviews. So I've got to put in the hours with the paddles, even if they're not my favorites. But I think we kind of talked about this a little bit last week in terms of, what do we keep coming back to?
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of how paddles kind of bubble up to the surface and to become my favorites is when I'm trying to calibrate. So I'll hit with the paddle that I know really well and then judge the other paddles based off of that one in terms of firepower, forgiveness, spin, everything else. And B, like, what do I want to play with? What do I just keep coming back to?
Yeah.
And there is some recency bias in that because, you put in the hours to do the review, and it's usually 2 weeks plus of playing with the paddle, and you become used to that paddle. You become fond of it. And most recently, it's been the Gearbox Ultimate Hyper. Before that, it was the Apes. Before that, it was the Paddletech ESQ. All those are excellent paddles, and all those are now pretty regular in my rotation. But I would say that the Apes Pulse V is probably my new main.
Yeah.
Definitely what I most prefer to play with these days.
I'm not sure like what your takeaways are when you play with a group of new paddles, but I'm rarely anymore floored by something that I just pick up and hit with for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's maybe there was a time when that happened, but it's I can't think of the last time when I was just like, yeah, this is going to be the next big thing.
Right.
It's usually, out of these 6 paddles, these 1 or 2 might be ones I want to play around with a little bit more, maybe make some adjustments to. There was enough there where I felt like, oh, this is something interesting.
Right.
And then from there, you go into that whole sort of adjustment and accommodation process to really have it float to the top. But we're not living in a time when there's going to be a paddle that just floors everybody right away. No,
there are very subtle differences between the paddles for the most part. And when we do get really excited about a paddle, it may not be because the paddle is that much better than other paddles. It may not be such a distinctive paddle, but like your example with the shapeshifter, we keep coming back to that. But it just did everything well, and it performed so well because it was kind of average. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's the Pulse is that way.
Yeah.
When I first played with them, it's okay.
Right. It didn't do anything exceptional, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Absolutely.
in that instance, and the Apes Pulse as well. Because unless you're an extreme player that loves to play with either usually power, and that's it, that's not your only game, then you're going to need a complex paddle. More than one note on a paddle to play well with it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of what we do is that, you could look at the highest firepower paddle with the greatest twist weight and maybe come to some conclusion that that's the best one.
Yeah.
But there's always that beautiful sort of X factor that in the unwritten code of a paddle that sort of brings it to the light.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. Great questions.
All right, John, any final thoughts?
No, looking forward to next week, choosing our winners from this week, giving away more paddles next week. So tune in again. We've got a lot more to give away and some surprises besides paddles as well.
We're looking forward to it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thanks, Eddie.
Take care.